finally time to go over the ducat. So, if you haven't heard this piece, I might call you a liar, especially if you've seen Fantasia, because this is the scene where Mickey and the brooms and that whole thing's going on, because he's literally the Sorcerer's Apprentice. They're kind of trying to tell the story. Now, what actual story was ducat meaning? I'm not really sure. There might actually be one. I just haven't really looked it up. But it's a really cool piece nonetheless. Ducat, French composer. So you will notice there are some weird things about the way that the music is written. France has, a couple of different little traditions and stuff. Like, for instance, a lot of the time their quarter rests look like backwards eighth rests. And that can be a little bit confusing. So if you see luckily, I think most of this is in 3/8. So we're not going to get a whole lot of that, luckily. All right. Anyway, the very first thing I want to go over is actually the second violin excerpt, at least the very top of it, because the bottom part of it, it's a lot of the same stuff that we do, but that top part is kind of rough. So I want to talk a little bit about, first of all, how to play it, and then how to practice it, and then kind of what to think about whenever you're doing this one for the audition. First thing I will do is I'm going to go ahead and play it slowly so that you can see where I'm shifting, what I'm doing with my bow, and all of my little suggestions there. This is starting at the very top of the second violin excerpts. First violins, you can skip ahead if you want. Sorry, that's better. And then we're at 24. So if you noticed, I'm doing a lot of shifting to make sure that my hand can kind of figure out what's going on with those notes there in the most efficient way possible. So I don't have to shift in the middle of a figure, because that's going to be kind of hard to do with it going super fast, because it's about 1 2 3 1 2 3. Usually this is conducted in 1 because it is very fast. I'm not going to play it that fast today because I have not been practicing it since I've been practicing the first violin excerpt. Of course, probably the best way to speed it up once you have everything down is going to be using a metronome and just going for it. Let's talk about a couple of the particularities. Number one, because of this bow stroke, you want to make sure that the down bows, whichever ones are on the 16th notes, since it's uneven. If you notice, there's supposed to be 3/8 notes in every measure. And it's usually bowed one bow to an 8th note, and then 2/8 notes to another bow, which means we want to make sure that the up bows, when it's on a single note, we kind of kick them, and then when we're on the down bows, otherwise we'll get, and then we're going to end up at the tip, which I don't think anybody wants to, because that's actually the hardest place to play that, right? So make sure, number one, you don't have to go too far. It's not forte, I don't think, anyway. Even if it is forte, it's usually forte because there's just so many people playing it. And it is supposed to be a little bit of a background kind of noise to all the melody and stuff like that going on. So it's not like you guys are playing a solo, right? Now, still practice it like that, of course, because you want your audition to be as good as possible. But just know that especially when we get in there and play it, it's just supposed to sound like some craziness going on in the background. So if you do a good take, it's not maybe perfect, I would still keep it. You can always try to make it better, but keep that one, because either way, I think, as long as you get the notes and stuff like that in there, if there's little mistakes, usually nobody notices. Okay. If you notice, at 23, the bow goes backwards, and that's just because otherwise you have to do a quick bow retake, and I think that just doesn't make any sense. So in other words, going into 23... Or hold on, I think it's that bow. Then you got to kind of flop it backwards. So if you want to practice just the bowing on its own, you can try it on just open strings. Corresponding to the open strings you'll eventually be playing. And so on and so forth. forth, just to get used to the weird bowing structure. The most important thing is I would do that because you want it to be very minimal of movement, right? It's hard enough of a part without trying to go all crazy with the bow. So in other words, I'm not moving a whole lot. Trying to move as little as possible. Okay, in terms of the fingers, I went ahead and I put a fingering on this one and I sent it out, but I'll go ahead and I'll go over it just a little bit. So I would start in third position as we got 4 flats here, number 1. Now, if you have that 1 on a C, you can put a half step to the 2 and a whole step. Then you gotta jump down a whole step, and then that actually revert, and then we open it up and we actually have 2 whole steps. Then you gotta jump back into third. So on and so forth. Then we get to 23. Jump into first. That's an A flat up there. So in other words, 2 half steps on that one. Jump into third, and it's still going to be 2 half steps. So in other words, if you just scrunch those fingers together, that'll help. Now, of course, listen, make sure you got those notes correct. Then you gotta jump back into third, and then you do it again. Jump into first. And then since you're already using your 2 in a high position, I like to use a 1 there. I'm gonna try to play that better in tune. Oh yeah, make sure you have a whole step between the D sharp and the C sharp. That was my problem. Okay, so that's it for the second violin excerpt, at least that top part there. I'm gonna continue now with the first violin excerpt and talk about a few things. But it'll pretty much be the same, of course, with the second violins. A lot of the chromatic and stuff like that. So, first violins. When we take a look, the main thing that we'll probably notice is it's just very chromatic, right? So make sure you know where your half steps and your whole steps are. That's probably the most important thing. I usually like to use a symbol like this for half steps. It's kind of like the down or the up bow symbol, but it's upside down, and I put it over 2 notes so that I know, oh, that's a half step. So if you need to do that anywhere in here, if it's easy to forget an interval, write that in so that it's easier to practice and you don't have to sit and think about it so much every time you practice it. There's also a couple of times where we get different versions of notes in different measures than we do in other places. You know, that's the whole thing with chromaticism, right? So what I'd really like to do is I'm just going to play it kind of slowly for us, and I might go over a couple of the notes that are in there. At the very beginning, this is just a chromatic jump up. Now instead of string crossing, I'm going to be using a 4th finger extension. I just think it's easier than, right, especially when you're going fast. Now, 26, you jump into 3rd position. You gotta move that D natural to a D flat, which means you gotta move that 2 down to a whole step. And then you gotta jump right back up. And then luckily, the last part you can use a harmonic if you need to. Okay, then on the next part, there's so much going on that it's sometimes good to be able to do those kind of weird snaky fingerings. Because I think it's better or easier sometimes than doing a direct shift from like 1st to 3rd. So what I do here is I start in 1st. And then I just kind of jump into like a high 1st position, or maybe like a low 2nd. Then I jump down. Jump up again. Jump up again. So a lot of shifting around there. Let me actually go ahead and explain it a little bit better. So in 1st, I'm just using a lot of low notes. And then I like to shift up my hand just a little bit so I can get to that 4th finger a little bit easier there. Then I move my whole hand down so I can get to the low notes easier. I jump up again for that. If you want to, too, you don't have to think about it like an A flat. You can think about it like a G sharp, if that makes it a little bit easier. Then I'm in real third position, 2 measures before 27. First position. Remember, a C flat's the same as a B natural. That G flat is really flat, so you gotta pull that for a second finger back. I just use an open here because it's gonna be so fast it's barely gonna be noticeable. And I use that to jump into that high position again. C flat is the same as B natural, so that's just a regular one. Then I jump into third really quick. Remember that G flat that's in there? Oh, but it goes away. And then you have a D flat. Let's actually go over that at 28. So we start out with a G flat and a B flat 2 before 28, and then if you notice, he takes away the G flat, and we just have a G natural now. So in other words, 2 before 28, while we're in third position. Got to make sure my fingers are nice and low, but then at 28, I got to pull up the 4 or the 2 for the E natural, and then I got to find that G natural with my pinky too. But it still has a low 1. D flat on the top. Then I just stay in third position. Augmented second from the B flat to the C sharp. Shift down. Doing one of those weird shift into like a 1.5 position. Third. Then I just kind of sneak up a half step for that E flat. I'm sorry about that. You gotta kind of shift down a little bit for that B natural. I just shift really quick into like a low 4th. And so on and so forth. And I'm sure you can probably figure out that last line on your own. The main thing about it is just making sure you know where your fingers have to go at any point in time, almost more so than any of the Tchaikovsky excerpts, because I would almost consider this one. There's 2 types of chromaticism. There's tonal chromaticism, where we're using chromaticism to kind of get from one key area to another. And I think both Tchaikovsky and Dukas are using that here. One sounds more unfunctional. So an unfunctional chromaticism is just chromaticism for chromatic sake, right? I want to say Dukas leans more toward that, although I'm not a theoretician. So don't quote me on that one. But it's good to kind of know exactly what's going on there, so that as you're practicing it, you know where your fingers need to go, and so that makes it easier to get it faster and faster, of course. All right, if you have any questions at all, please let me know. And since this is my last video, I will wish you good luck on the audition. I'll try to have my audition videos up as soon as possible. I'm hoping within the next week, so that you can hear a finished audition. My biggest, which I think I already talked about a couple of these, but I'll quickly go over them again. When you record a good video, keep it. That might be the best one. It does happen sometimes. Go slow. Find all the notes, then it's easier to speed it up. One thing I like to do is I'll usually focus on 1 or 2 excerpts at a time, get them recorded, and then I'll move on to the next, so I don't feel like I have to have 5 excerpts super ready. It's kind of nice to do a video audition that way, so that you don't have to have them all and play them all in person. So, you know, 5 or 6 excerpts is kind of difficult, so make it work for you. All right? Good luck on the audition, and I'll see you guys in the fall.